Now let's talk about how to diagnose a formula and how to trace all the variables that are playing a main role in generating the value resulted from that formula. We have here a medical office startup expenses, and those expenses are being linked most of the cases with a certain equations. You can know that, as we learned previously, by clicking on the certain cell and looking in the formula line over here, and we can see if that exact cell is being connected to a certain formula or not. And in some cases you have a result that doesn't make sense, like let's say this sum doesn't make sense, or there's something going on wrong, or even the formula is giving you an error or a mistake. How are you going to trace that and make sure what is going on in your spreadsheet or in your tab? So we have here certain values, and let's go to the total funding. Usually total means a sum of a certain group of cells. So here the sum equals $620,000, and if we want to know what does that total means, then we click on the formula bar over here, and he will highlight for you with a color code of which means what. So in this case, E15 to E17 in blue or in purple, and he's highlighting those cells for you, and he's saying the sum between parentheses of the purple. So this cell represents the sum of those values highlighted in purple. So this sum is the total of these three values, and you can probably do a cross check and have a calculator on hand. If this value is crucial for you and you think it doesn't make sense, you can go back and see the investors value, the loans value, the additional funding, if they really sum to this exact total, and so on. So you can see here this value of loans is $5,000, and that represents E16 in purple minus D16 in red. So this minus this equals this. So every time you have your formula being like having an error, or if it is giving you a certain problem, then you can tell. So in this case I try to make an error. So he say the formula in this cell differs from the formula in this area of the spreadsheet. So Excel detected for you that you called out AZ16 as the subtracted value, but most of your values are located within this area, so that could be an error. He just giving you a heads up in this case. But as simple as that. Two ways to diagnose a formula. Make sure the formula is written in the right way. So you're writing sum, not SU, let's say. Sometimes it happens that there is a function that is matching your mistake or your typo. But in this case, he say hashtag name question mark. It means the equation doesn't make sense for Excel. Then I can know, oh, okay, there's an M over here to give you the sum, and hit enter. He will give you the total values. Same thing for the value on the right, same thing for the value on the left. Each one of these values is the result of a certain equation being applied that you can see over here. So you can use the color coding to trace your equation and use your common sense. If you are owning a medical office startup company, well, you know what the investors gave you roughly, you know what loans you have, and you can tell if this number makes sense or doesn't make sense. But either you or whoever you're hiring within your company can look back on those numbers and trace what is going on by clicking on the certain cell that have the number that doesn't make sense, looking up at the formula bar, make sure the formula makes sense. What does this column represent and what does this column represent? Does it make sense to subtract D13 from minus, or to subtract E13 minus D13? Those things are making sense. Excel can't help you. For Excel, the equation makes sense, but for you, the number, does it make sense or not? That's something you know better than anybody else. But like programming wise or logic wise, Excel recognize those equations as a logical equations. Your job is to make sure those numbers make sense. I'm repeating myself here, so highlight this cell that has the total, or there's an equation representing that value, and go back, trace all the cells involved, make sure there's no mistakes happen in lengthy either financial or engineering or any other numbers related application. You will have some problems or some pitfalls while you are building your document, and you will find either a certain mistake being called out by Excel for writing the formula, or a certain number that doesn't make sense. You can trace back and make sure it is good to go. We can take another example over here. So you have here the general expenses, office expenses, marketing expenses, and you can see it's been represented as simple as a sum equation over here, but the sum is going from here to here. Some cases you could by mistake make the sum being represented this way, then you say, wow, this number is huge. Then you go back to the equation. Oh, that's why, because he got the total from the previous expenses bracket. Another good tool that Excel provide in order to make sure that you are tracing the equation in the way that you want it to be traced, or you are seeing all the ins and outs for your equation, is by tracing the precedents or tracing the dependents. If you go to Formula tab over here, you can see trace precedents or trace dependents. If you click on a certain cell that has an equation representing that cell, that in this case being represented as the sum of E15 to E17, trace precedents, he's telling you the blue are the precedents given or playing a main role in generating this total sum. And you can say trace dependents to say which other values depending on this value, and it is dependence. So in this case, he say this value is contributing to this value and contributing to this value. If you want to confirm that, then click on this one. You can see, yeah, that's true. This value is depending on this value because it's part of the equation representing this cell. And here you can see it is E13 minus E5. So in this case, E13 is playing a main role in generating this value. So those two, trace precedents, trace dependence, and manual inspection for the equation, all could be a good and handy tool when you have a lengthy and a complex document with a lot of equations being involved in generating the final values.